because I have really limited access to Canvas in stage 4 lockdown, which essentially just means you can't do shit that is non-essential. So super limited access to any art materials. Basically, yeah, I'm just working through everything that I have at the moment, which is fun. So I've been going through all of my old canvases, and I found this bad boy, which I think this was at a stage where I was in between kind of two different things, and I think even at the time this was like I don't know, I don't really think it was finished. It didn't feel right at the time, but it was at the end of the semester. I'd run out of time. It was like it was finished enough to submit, which I think is easy to do when you have deadlines, is just to convince yourself that something's finished when it very clearly isn't. I feel like at this kind of beginning stage of art, when I'm working on a massive piece like this, it loosens you up, gets you into a nice state of flow, especially when you're painting over something else that I don't completely despise this. It's just not, it's nothing. There's still a lot of blank canvas on there. I think at this point of my life, I was playing with texture a lot, or surface. So yeah, like you can see with the spray here, the variation between primed and unprimed, I was just finding really interesting because this is the stage. And why this is so weird is because I was working on walls and doing site-specific, like installation-y wall works with painting, and so I couldn't meld my canvas work into that, and so this is just some fucked up amalgamation of the two. I feel like now, that's my cat. Now that ISO is here, I don't have access to walls, and so it's forced me to work on canvas again, which I'm just blue skying ISO, and the fact that I just missed out on a year of school and still paying the same amount in fees. Yeah, blue skying it, blocking out everything. Basically starting to, I guess, reintroduce the techniques that I learned through site-specific installation onto what I would argue is still site-specific canvas works, but obviously they're not, they can be moved. And perhaps it'll create a more interesting dynamic when they are moved out of this space, because at the moment, everything in this space I deem as part of my work. I'm in my family's garage at the moment, so I'm sharing the space with like my dad, my family who parks their cars in here. So a lot of it is just completely out of my control, which has been, I guess, the general theme of ISO. Just pulling back the veil of control, just taking away any of the comfort and stability that we had. That it is all just a manifestation of our minds projected on. I'm painting over this. That's all I needed to say. To get everything out. Generally, when I'm working on a canvas this size, I block in a lot of shapes with a large brush, and I go in with spray. I start on the floor, not all the time, but a lot of the time, just because it's easier to get a whole bunch of paint on a canvas quickly, avoid drips and that kind of thing. Sometimes drips are good, but a lot of the time I don't want them. If I want them, I want it in a really minimal way so you can tell that it is intentional. Not that that necessarily matters, but I think because my work is generally ambiguous, it's such a balancing act between what is intentional, what is accidental, what is finished, what is unfinished. I think because I base a lot of my work in this really fugitive state of it's resolved, but it's like balancing by a thread. So it's really important for me to demonstrate like this is intentional, to not have too much of those accidental things on there. Even though I let things occur naturally, it's all really, really curated and edited. I realized that A looks like an anarchy symbol. I just do A because of my name. It just is a motif that just naturally occurs when I'm fucking around. A lot of the time I paint over it, but the vast majority of my work does have an A in there at some stage, whether it's painted over or not. It's just what happens naturally, I guess, because I'm a vain bitch. What can I say? Because I work in such an abstracted state, I always make sure to rotate my canvases over and over again. I never, in my creation process, want to be hindered by having a specific layout in my mind or specific way of working. It needs to be constantly changing. I can't just say, oh, this is the way it's going to be, because it just doesn't work like that. Even at the end stage, I always have to rotate my canvases and really meditate on which way I want it to be facing. I've done it a couple of times where I have works hanging in my room or in my studio and have them there for a few weeks in their finished state and realize that they're upside down. So it's really important to get that balance. It's intentional, but it's also accidental. It's this process of kind of listening to the paint and working with the paint, not necessarily using the paint as a tool, but seeing it as an equal almost. Like you're working with this material, it has its own qualities and its own way of being and of existing. There are things you can do with paint that you can't do with anything else, and vice versa. So you need to make sure that you're really listening to the medium. You're paying attention to what it is capable of and what it naturally wants to do. I'm going to finish the video here. I think this was about 5 hours, I think. Yeah. Which, because I move around a lot, it's kind of difficult to film. So I usually I'm working on like 20 things at the moment. So I'll like rotate the different canvases of paper around so that I'm not just dedicating like weeks on one thing. So I'll come back to this. I'm gonna leave it for a few days, maybe a week. I like to allow myself time to breathe, because I think working subconsciously while you're working on other things is really important. If I just work on something non-stop, it just ends up getting drowned. So when you're working on something else, your mind is thinking about what's in the background, and even if it's not, those skills that you're putting onto that canvas sort of manifests into all of your other work. So this is the initial stages of making a new work, or painting over an old work but still using that old work as a reference. Yeah, I think it's a pretty interesting process, and it's cool for me to look back on it because you get so in the zone, you're really not conscious of what you're doing at the time. Which is why I just showed myself working on this canvas. I don't know if I should be demonstrating more a full studio view where I am working on multiple things at once, but I feel like that might be a little bit chaotic, which I think is good, but